My husband threw my suitcase onto the lawn and changed the locks. His girlfriend stood in our bedroom window, looking down as if the house were already hers. The neighbors were already filming everything. I saw the screens glowing, heard the whispers, and felt the kind of silence that only exists when someone is about to become a spectacle. I smiled. Then, I called a number. 15 minutes later, a man showed up. My husband's face went white. Then he bellowed, "What are you doing here? This is my house!" The man didn't argue. He just held out a slim portfolio with the calm of someone who deals in reality, not shouting. My husband took the paper, read 2 lines, and the voice died in his throat. The fear on his face wasn't of me. It was of what was written. I didn't touch the suitcase. The clothes on the lawn weren't about me. They were about control. It was his version of humiliating me in public and forcing me to react in the right way for his narrative. My name is Helen. I'm 39 years old. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm a partner in a small logistics company that serves pharmacies and e-commerce businesses. I built my life with discipline, spreadsheets, contracts, and on-time payments. I wasn't born rich. I became stable. Edward entered my life when I was already on my feet. At first, he seemed enchanted by it. He said I was strong and admirable. Over time, admiration turned into competition. He wanted me to shrink so he could feel big. The betrayal didn't start the day I saw that woman in the window. It began months earlier in a series of details that anyone over 40 recognizes. Mood swings, small secrets, unexplained expenses, the desire to fight over nothing. Edward started coming home later, showering as soon as he walked in, and hiding his phone as if it were a classified document. I didn't make a scene, I observed, and I confirmed it, without needing to invade his privacy. He started withdrawing cash in odd amounts, avoiding credit card payments, and inventing Saturday meetings. Once at the bank, I saw the statement for our joint account and realized pieces were missing. It wasn't much, but it was constant. It was the kind of thing that, when accumulated, pays for motels, gifts, dinners, and lies. When I asked, he did what men like him do. He turned the tables. "You just have to control everything. You don't trust me. You're cold." Cold. I heard that word so many times it lost its meaning. I understood that he needed to call me cold to justify what he was doing. If I was harsh, he was free. If I was the worst, he could be better. I let him talk. While he talked, I organized my protection. Separating emotion from documentation was the best decision of my life. I adjusted our accounts. The joint account was left only for fixed expenses, with everything recorded. I saved renovation receipts, invoices, contracts, and statements. I made a copy of the mortgage documents, left spare keys with a trusted friend, and found a lawyer who wasn't one of Edward's BBQ buddies. It wasn't about destroying anyone, it was about preventing myself from being destroyed, because I knew what was coming. Edward didn't just want to leave, he wanted to win. And when a man confuses marriage with territory, he tries to evict the woman as if she were an intruder. That morning, I left early for a meeting with a major client. My phone was on silent for an hour. When I picked it up, there was a message from my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson. "Helen, are you home? Your husband is doing something strange out front." I left before the meeting was over and drove with my mind already working like a clock. When I turned the corner and saw my suitcase on the lawn, open, with clothes scattered, I didn't feel tears. I felt focus. The shame he wanted to inflict on me became a warning. Now Edward was on the porch with a new key in his hand, holding it up like a trophy. His girlfriend appeared in our bedroom window, leaning on the frame, looking at me as if I were the old part of the house, finally being discarded. 2 neighbors were holding their phones. One didn't even try to hide it. Edward spoke loudly for everyone to hear. "You don't live here anymore. It's over. Get out." I walked to the door and turned the locked handle. I looked at him and asked, without raising my voice, "Did you change the locks?" I did. "And if you make a scene, I'll call the police." He wanted the police, he wanted the drama, he wanted the perfect video of an unhinged woman to justify everything later. He wanted me to beg or attack, anything but what I did. I smiled and dialed a number I had saved for weeks. "You can come now," I said. He did it. I hung up, put my phone away, and stood with the posture of someone waiting for a bus. That's what irritated Edward the most. I didn't fall for his script. "Who did you call, Helen? Your lawyer?" he scoffed. I remained silent. I learned early that silence is also a form of command. 15 minutes later, a car pulled up. A man got out with a portfolio in his hand and walked toward us without rushing. He greeted us politely, asked for my name, and confirmed my identity. Then he turned to Edward and handed him the papers. I saw my husband's face change instantly. He read, blinking rapidly, as if trying to deny what he was seeing. He turned white, truly white. Then he yelled, and I understood with an icy clarity that he wasn't yelling at me. He was yelling at the fact that I was not the woman he thought he could kick off her own ground. I saw Edward's hand tremble on the paper. He tried to hand it back as if the document were burning. "This is a lie. Who sent you here?" he shouted, but his voice no longer had the same force. The man didn't argue. "Sir, I'm just serving a notice. Mrs. Miller is aware. You have also been notified. The word notified has a specific weight." Edward looked around, searching for an audience. Mrs. Peterson didn't blink. I continued to not touch my suitcase. I knew they were filming, and I wanted the image to be simple. A woman standing quietly, and a man crumbling in his own theater. Someone's phone pinged again and again, like the sound of a neighborhood social media group when something big happens. I could almost imagine the messages. "Oh my God." Edward changed the locks and threw Helen's stuff on the lawn. People don't waste time with details. They go straight for the video. "Helen, you're embarrassing me," he said, trying to put on his mask. "You took care of that all by yourself." The man opened the portfolio and pointed with his finger where Edward needed to read. It was a formal notice regarding the changing of the locks and the attempt to deny me access to the property, which was legally my residence as well. My lawyer had been direct. He can throw a fit. What stands up in court is the documentation. Edward read the part that mentioned residency and possession rights, and his face lost its color again. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, still trying to sound in charge. "Sir, will you allow Mrs. Miller to enter, or would you prefer I document your refusal?" the man asked politely. Edward swallowed hard, looking up at the bedroom window. His girlfriend was still there, but now with the expression of someone who didn't understand the game she had signed up for. She knew about silent victories, not about county records, property deeds, and notarized signatures. And if I had to bet, she didn't even know the amount of the mortgage I paid on time every month. "You can't come in," Edward tried, out of sheer stubbornness. The man made a note, asked for the full names of 2 witnesses, and took pictures of the new lock, the locksmith's tag still stuck to the metal, my name on the mailbox. He documented the suitcase on the lawn, and he documented the refusal. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Real control. Not the emotional control he accused me of, but control over my path, over the consequences. While he filled out his paperwork, I remembered the first day we signed that mortgage in Charlotte. My hand was sweating on the pen, and Edward was smiling, saying we were going to grow together. Except his "together" was always elastic. In the early years, he brought in a steady salary as a sales manager. I already had my small but organized company. I handled the boring stuff: contracts, costs, invoices. He handled the social side: barbecues, friends, the man-of-the-house posture. I let him, because I had no interest in competing within our home. Slowly, he started to turn money into a battleground. Bills were paid late for no reason. A credit card limit was maxed out on a card I barely used. When I questioned him, he turned the tables. "Don't you think I have a right to it?" I didn't respond on impulse. I went after the facts, and the picture became clear. Hidden expenses, withdrawals at strange hours, purchases that weren't for us. It wasn't carelessness. It was a pattern. It was a plan. He was testing how much I would tolerate, and when he realized I wasn't making a scene, he concluded I wouldn't react at all. The affair came as a consequence. When I saw the woman in our bedroom window, I was already emotionally distant enough not to implode. I'm not the kind of woman who gathers evidence to humiliate. I gather evidence to avoid being run over. My lawyer, Mr. Roberts didn't promise me revenge. He promised me a method. First, we protect your company. Second, your home. Third, we prevent him from creating a victim narrative, he had said, looking at my documents like he was reading a spreadsheet. I gave him everything. The mortgage agreement, proof of transfers, renovation invoices, receipts. I even gave him the email from the hardware store confirming the purchase of the old lock years ago under my name. The house was in both our names, but the vast majority of the payments had come from me. And in this country, that's not an opinion. It's proof. Can he kick me out of the house? I had asked him to be clear. He can try. And today, he tried. Now you are going to go inside. And if he resists, we escalate the right way. I looked again at Edward, sweating under the sun, surrounded by his own neighbors, and I understood that he had gambled on my shame. He bet that I would leave to avoid being filmed. He bet that I would agree to sort it out later, as if later exists when someone is willing to trample all over you. But I didn't leave. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and waited for his next sentence to die in his throat. The process server closed his portfolio and asked me, "Ma'am, would you like me to accompany your attempt to enter?" "Yes, and I want everything documented." Edward opened his mouth to shout one more time, but no sound came out. He looked at his girlfriend in the window as if searching for courage. She had already taken a step back. I walked to the door and touched the handle again, calmly. I knew that behind that new lock was more than a house. There was a life he thought he could lock away. Edward stood frozen in front of the door, as if he still believed that if he remained motionless, reality would pass by without touching him. "Helen, you're taking this too far," he said quietly. "We can talk without people watching." I looked at the lawn, at the open suitcase, at the neighbors' phones. It wasn't people watching. It was what he chose to provoke. "You wanted to talk when it was still inside the house," I replied. "Now it's outside, and it's on the record." The process server pointed to the lock. "Sir, access to the residence must be granted. If you maintain your refusal, I will document it and forward it. The lady can then request police assistance." Edward clenched his jaw, trying one last piece of theater. I don't have the key." The new key was making a clear outline in his pocket. The official didn't move. "Then you authorize a locksmith to open it at your expense, with the attempted obstruction duly noted." The word expense tends to wake up men who like to shout. Edward looked up at the window. His girlfriend had disappeared. Courage behind glass is always short-lived. "This is going to look bad for you," he tried, aiming for my pride. I didn't lose my tone. "What looks bad is changing the locks on a mortgaged house and thinking that yelling makes it law." He shoved his hand in his pocket and pulled out the key. He opened the door angrily, as if doing me a favor. I walked in slowly, not like someone retrieving a suitcase, but like someone reclaiming her position. The process server followed, taking notes. The living room was normal, but it wasn't. A wine glass on the table, a sweet perfume in the air, a cushion out of place, details that make no noise but leave a mark. Edward tried to block the hallway with his body. "She's not here. She's gone. There. Are you satisfied?" I walked past him without arguing and went straight to the bedroom. Our bedroom. The bed hastily made, things displaced in the bathroom, the kind of tidying up someone does to erase a person in 5 minutes. I opened the closet. The drawer where I kept a folder of documents was empty. "Where is my folder?" I asked, still looking at the space. "What folder?" He put on a clueless face. I took a breath. "The folder with certificates, policies, contracts. Don't play games with me." He started talking over himself, trying to play therapist. "You always have to control everything, Helen. You don't trust anyone." "You changed the lock," I cut in calmly, "and you made my documents disappear. Trust has nothing to do with this." The process server looked up, attentive. "Ma'am, do you wish to report the removal of documents?" he asked. "Yes, and I'm going to take pictures." I took photos of the closet, the empty drawer, the new lock, the suitcase on the lawn as seen from the living room window. I also photographed a woman's sandal behind the sofa, not out of jealousy, but for context. For the timeline, Edward took an angry step forward. "You can't photograph my house." I didn't even raise my voice. "Our house." The process server intervened, his voice dry enough to cut. "Sir, any attempt to impede this documentation will be noted." Edward backed down. His hatred wasn't about love, it was about a loss of dominion. I went to the kitchen and grabbed the mortgage envelope with both our names on it. I wanted to feel the paper in my hand, not as a symbol, but as physical proof that he couldn't erase me. "What did you want to achieve by kicking me out, Edward?" I asked. "Put another woman in here and pretend I never existed?" "You're being dramatic. We were already in a bad place," he answered weakly. "Being in a bad place doesn't authorize anyone to evict the other from their home." The process server concluded his work, filling out the initial refusal, documenting the lock change and the absence of my documents. He handed one copy to me and another to Edward, purely technical, no emotion. When the front door closed, it was just the two of us. Edward paced the living room restlessly. "You humiliated me in front of the neighbors." "You locked me out," I replied. "The humiliation came with it." He stopped in front of me. "You think you're going to win this?" I held his gaze. "I don't want to win you, Edward. I want to win security and peace." I picked up my suitcase from the lawn, came back inside, closed the door, and sat on the sofa for a second. Not out of exhaustion, but out of decision. "I'm staying," I said. He laughed without humor. "Here? With me?" "Here. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to the bank, then to the office, and if you touch anything else, it will be documented." I didn't argue further. I opened my purse, took out my charger, a notebook, and my car keys. Small things that become survival tools when someone tries to throw you out. Edward stood in the hallway, typing on his phone with the urgency of someone calling for backup. I heard him say in a short, almost whispered voice message, "She's here, and she came with an official. Figure something out." I didn't have to guess who it was for. In America, everyone has a friend who can fix things. And that's why I had already planned my next steps. Bank, office, courthouse, places where friends don't have authority. I sent a text to Mr. Roberts. "I'm in. Lock change documented, folder missing. At the bank, 8 a.m. tomorrow." He replied in minutes. "Bring your ID, proof of residence, and the screenshots. Don't sign anything without me." I looked at Edward as if he were a logistics problem. It's not personal. It's a route. I knew that when money is at the center, the next move is usually swift. Late that night, my phone vibrated on the nightstand. A notification from my banking app, an attempted login to the joint account, and it wasn't me. I didn't sleep. Not from fear, but from calculation. When someone tries to take your home, the next step is almost always to take your money. The bank notification just after 11 p.m. wasn't a surprise, it was a confirmation. Edward always knew where I kept things because I never needed to hide anything during our marriage. But when trust dies, knowledge becomes a weapon. At 6:30 a.m., I was already up. I had black coffee, the way I do when I need to think clearly. I gathered my driver's license, social security card, proof of residence, the mortgage contract, and the copy of the process server's report. I put everything in a simple, drama-free folder, the kind a woman who learned to survive with paperwork uses. Edward appeared in the kitchen, his face puffy, trying to seem calm. "Leaving so early?" he asked, as if he still had authority over my schedule. "I'm going to fix what you tried to mess with last night," I replied. He feigned surprise. "I didn't mess with anything. I didn't argue. A lie, when you have screenshots and official reports, is just noise." On the way to the bank, I called Mr. Roberts. "He tried to access the joint account last night," I said. "Go straight to the branch," he responded. "Request an access freeze, change all passwords, and review device profiles. And if there's any power of attorney, revoke it today." Power of attorney? The word stuck in my head. I knew that years ago, when we refinanced the mortgage and later opened a line of credit for the business, the bank manager suggested certain conveniences, authorizations, cross-linked accounts, shared access, things you agree to because they're practical. Practical until they become dangerous. I arrived at the bank shortly after 8 a.m. The branch was starting to fill up. People with tickets in their hands, retirees with plastic folders, employees rushing with papers. Real life, no glamour. This was where things changed. I asked to speak with the manager, Patricia. She knew me. I was a longtime client, a predictable payer the kind banks respect. When I sat down in front of her, I didn't tell a story. I presented facts. Someone tried to access my joint account last night. I need to freeze all access, review permissions, and file an internal report. I also need to verify if there is any power of attorney in my name or any authorization linked to my husband. Patricia raised her eyebrows, turned to her computer, asked for my ID, and asked objective questions. I showed her the app notification and the copy of the process server's report about the lockout. She didn't comment on the drama. She commented on the risk. "Helen, I'm initiating a security protocol. Do you want to keep the joint account active? I want it to exist only for fixed expenses with a low limit, and for any transaction over a certain amount to require two-factor authentication and my physical presence," I replied. Patricia typed. I heard the keyboard like I was hearing locks being changed, but this time by me. "And additional credit cards?" she asked. "Cancel any in his name linked to my personal credit lines and block his device's access to the app." She hesitated, as if it were a delicate matter. "He will need to come into." "He can come in. I will too. And everything will be documented. Yesterday he changed the locks. Today I changed the access." Patricia nodded. "There, I saw something many women don't realize until it's too late. A bank doesn't operate on emotion. A bank operates on rules. Whoever shows up with documents and clarity gets through." In 20 minutes, I left with new security protocols, changed passwords, redefined limits, and a confirmation that there was no active power of attorney, but there had been a designated representative on an old credit line, which the manager deactivated on the spot. "Thank you," I said. "Helen, be careful. If he tried this yesterday, he might try again somewhere else," she replied in a low voice. I knew. From the bank, I went straight to the company. My logistics business operated out of a small, organized warehouse with 2 vans, an office, and a lean team that depended on me for their salaries and stability. I never mixed romance with payroll, but Edward had tried. When I arrived, my partner, Robert, was already waiting for me with coffee and a serious look on his face. "He showed up here yesterday afternoon," Robert said without beating around the bush. My stomach didn't lurch. It just tightened. What did he want? He wanted to talk about the company. Said you two were splitting up and he needed to secure his share. Asked about accounts, cash flow, contracts. I cut him off, Robert continued. Told him I wouldn't discuss anything without you present. I took a slow breath. The piece fit. He didn't just want me out of the house. He wanted to leave me without a foundation. A woman without a foundation becomes a desperate woman. And a desperate woman signs anything. You did the right thing, I told Robert. From now on, any contact from him with this company is to be considered attempted interference. I'm going to formalize this. I called our accountant, Jessica, on a quick video call. I asked for a simple report, recent access to the corporate email, any password change attempts, any strange activity. I also asked her to review who had signing authority on company contracts and bank accounts. I wanted any blind spots illuminated. While we were talking, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello? A woman's voice, overly careful. Helen? This is Chloe. Chloe. I didn't have to ask who it was. The name came with the scent of sweet perfume and an open window. I just wanted to say that yesterday was an overreaction. Edward was just upset. I was silent for a second, not to listen, but to choose my tone. Chloe, you were standing in my bedroom window. You saw my suitcase on the lawn. That isn't being upset. That's a decision. I don't want any trouble. Then get out of the story, I replied, without aggression. Because from now on, everything he does to me has consequences, and whoever stands next to him is standing near the fallout. She hung up without responding. Better that way. I wasn't interested in fighting over a man. I was interested in stopping a con. By late morning, I was in my office with Robert and Jessica, printing out changes to signing authorities, reinforcing security, and protecting our most vulnerable points. None of this felt like movie-style revenge. It was real revenge, taking away the other person's ability to destroy you. And that's when Jessica sent me a short text. "Helen, there was an attempt to reset the finance email password yesterday at 11:47 p.m. It didn't go through because I activated two-factor authentication last month." 11:47 p.m. After the shouting, after the locks, after the theatrics, I leaned back in my chair and felt the last shred of doubt die. Edward wasn't in love, he was at war. I opened my phone and texted Mr. Roberts. He tried the bank, he tried the company. "I want a formal order today." The reply came back quickly. "Okay, we'll file this afternoon, and tomorrow morning I'll take you somewhere he won't be able to shout." I looked at the cold screen and, for the first time in a long time, I truly smiled. The place where he wouldn't be able to shout wasn't an expensive restaurant or a glass-walled office. It was the kind of place that always has a line, an overly strong air conditioner, and people clutching plastic folders. The courthouse. I arrived with Mr. Roberts shortly after 2 p.m. I was wearing slacks, a simple blouse, and the same expression I use when I need to solve a client's problem. No hurry, no trembling. Real-life revenge begins when you stop asking for permission to exist. "You okay?" he asked in the elevator. "I'm lucid," I replied, and that's what he's afraid of. In the waiting area, Mr. Roberts opened his portfolio and reviewed each item with me, like someone building a case with no room for loose emotion. Lock change documented by the process server. Removal of documents reported. Attempted access to the bank. Attempted password reset on the finance email. Witnesses: Mrs. Peterson, 2 other neighbors. Video: the whole neighborhood. "We're going to ask for a temporary restraining order," he said, "to prevent him from touching any assets, from trying to remove you from the residence, and from accessing anything related to the company without formal authorization." I nodded. "And I want one thing on the record. He's not confused. He's calculating," I said. Mr. Roberts looked at me and made a note. "That goes in as a concrete risk, not as an opinion." When it was our turn, we entered a small room with a tired-looking clerk and an old computer. Real life. The papers that change your life don't have a soundtrack. I signed what I needed to sign. Mr. Roberts gathered the documents. The clerk stamped them and explained the next steps. I listened to everything without asking twice. I had already learned that in any system, the ones who get lost are the ones who don't understand the path. "Will a decision on the TRO come quickly?" I asked. "Usually, yes," Mr. Roberts answered quietly. "But I don't sell miracles. I work with strategy." We left the courthouse and went straight to the county recorder's office. I needed duplicates of things that were in the missing folder: certificates, certified copies, records he thought he could erase by stealing paper. At the counter, the employee asked for my ID and started listing what could be reissued. A duplicate of your marriage certificate you can get from Vital Records. The property deed, we can pull that from our records. The insurance policy, you'll have to request that from the insurance company with your social security number and personal details. I breathed and felt a spike of cold anger. Not anger at losing paper, but anger at the realization that he had gone into my closet with intent. He thought that by taking a folder, he could take my foundation, I said, almost to myself. Mr. Roberts made no comment, just turned a page in his notepad. "There's one more thing," he said. "I want to see the title for the car." The car. Edward had a sedan in his name, but it was purchased with money that came partly from our joint account, the kind of asset that disappears quickly when someone wants to cash out. On the way, my phone vibrated. A text from Robert. "Helen," he texted me again, "says he's going to get his share and that you'll regret this." I read it and didn't reply. I forwarded it to Mr. Roberts. The threat wasn't to make me tremble. It was for me to document. Back in his office, Mr. Roberts asked a question I thought was too simple. "Helen, does he have access to any of your digital certificates, passwords, anything like that?" I went cold. "No, "I don't think so. I don't think so," is the phrase that destroys organized people. I closed my eyes for a second and pulled up a memory from months ago when we made a change to the mortgage and the manager asked for an electronic signature on a form. Edward was standing beside me, watching curiously. I typed in the password. He was close. My stomach tightened. "I'll check everything," I said. Mr. Roberts nodded. "Tonight." Late that afternoon, I returned home with an envelope of copies, forms, and instructions. Edward wasn't there. The house felt too quiet, as if yesterday's noise had been sucked into the walls. I went up to the bedroom. The window was closed. The closet still had my invaded space. I opened the empty drawer again, just to see with my own eyes that it was real. That's when I saw it on the floor of the closet. A folded piece of paper, almost hidden behind the frame of a shoebox. It wasn't mine. I pulled it out with 2 fingers, a printed draft. The title read, "Proposal for Dissolution of Partnership in Equity." Below it was a list of figures and a phrase that made my breath catch. Signature, Helen Miller, recognition by similarity. I read it twice. It wasn't a valid document yet, but it was a plan. Worse, recognition by similarity was a legal term I didn't fully grasp, but it sounded like a way to get a signature approved without me being present. If someone brought in a decent forgery and had enough nerve, my heart didn't race. It grew steady, as if it had finally understood the scale of the con. I took a photo and sent it to Mr. Roberts. He tried to prepare a dissolution agreement with my signature. The reply came in less than a minute. "Do not sign anything. Do not agree to any meetings alone. Tomorrow morning we are going to every bank and notary where you have an account or a signature on file. We will block any non-personal verification and update your signature cards. He has crossed a line." I sat on the bed for a second. Not to cry, to accept the truth. The man I had called my husband was willing to forge my hand to take my life's work. Edward arrived close to 8 p.m. I heard the gate, the footsteps, the key. He walked in with an attempt at tranquility on his face. "We need to talk," he said, as if he were still in control of the script. I stood in the living room with my phone in my hand, already recording audio. Not for blackmail, but to prevent him from lying later. "Talk," I replied. He looked around as if noticing the house had gotten smaller. "You're turning everything into a war. I just want it to be fair." I smiled. Not the smile from the lawn, but a short, almost sad smile. Fair would be you not touching what isn't yours. Fair would be you not changing the locks. Fair would be you not taking my documents. And fair would be you not trying to sign my name. His face changed. "What are you talking about?" I held up my phone and showed him the photo without handing over the paper. He tried to get closer. "Give me that." "No," I replied. "Now you're going to listen. Tomorrow morning, you will be officially served. And if you attempt any transaction, any signature, any access, you won't be shouting. You'll be explaining." He stood frozen, his anger stuck, like a dog that understands the leash. "You think I'm afraid of a notary?" he spat, trying to regain his irony. I took a firm step back. "You were afraid yesterday when the paper arrived, and you'll be afraid again when the court order arrives." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something that wasn't desire for another woman. It was the desperation of losing his exit strategy. "Helen, you're going to destroy me." I kept my tone low. "No, Edward, I'm going to stop you from destroying me. There's a difference." And I went to my room, closed the door, and locked it from the inside. Not out of fear of him, but out of respect for myself. That night, for the first time in days, I slept. Not because the war was over, but because I had already chosen how it would be won. The next morning, I arrived at the notary's office before the doors opened. Charlotte still had that humid, early-day air, and the parking lot was already half full. There's always someone in America chasing paperwork. Wills, marriages, divorces, deeds, power of attorney. It's a country where life changes with a stamp. Mr. Roberts arrived shortly after, with the same portfolio and the same demeanor of someone not distracted by drama. "Today we close the loopholes," he said. I showed him the photo of the draft agreement again, just to reinforce the context. He tried to prepare everything as if I would sign under pressure, I said. He tried to prepare everything as if you would sign out of fear, Mr. Roberts corrected. And you won't. When we were called, I was direct. I want to restrict any signature verification for me to be in person only. I want all verifications to require my physical presence and my photo ID. And I want to update my signature card. The clerk gave me a quick, knowing look, like someone who had seen this movie before. Ma'am, are you concerned about fraud? I have proof of an attempt, I said, without theatrics. She asked for my driver's license, confirmed my details, and pulled up my old file. My signature was there, the same one I made years ago at a plastic table with a cheap pen the day I first registered it, never imagining it would one day become a defense. You'll need to sign again here and here, she instructed. I signed slowly, the way I always do when it's serious. Mr. Roberts asked that a formal note be added to the notary's system, signature verification by in-person authentication only. The clerk typed, printed, and handed me a receipt. Done. Any attempt to verify a signature without you present will be blocked and will generate an internal alert, she explained. I nodded my thanks. It wasn't relief, it was protection, built brick by brick. From the notary, Mr. Roberts took me directly to a police station to file a report for the theft of documents and the attempted fraud. It wasn't for revenge via the police, it was to leave a trail. In America, if you don't file a report, tomorrow it becomes your word against theirs. At the station, the officer seemed tired but professional. I told him only what mattered. My husband changed the locks and tried to deny me access to our home. A process server documented it. I then identified the disappearance of a folder with personal and contractual documents, and I found a draft of a dissolution agreement suggesting my signature could be verified without my presence. The officer typed without looking up much. Do you have photos? I do, I said, showing him my phone screen. He attached the files. I left with a case number. When we got back to the car, my phone vibrated again. A bank notification. Another password reset attempt, this time at a different hour. Repetition, persistence. Edward, testing every limit. I didn't reply to him. I forwarded it to Mr. Roberts and then went to the office. Robert was waiting at the door. He's been calling our suppliers, he said, asking about contracts, trying to present himself as the person in charge. I felt my patience wear thin, not out of jealousy, but because of the threat to other people's livelihoods. My team depended on stability, and desperate men tend to set everything on fire just to see if someone else will put it out. Then today, we cut that off, I replied. Mr. Roberts came in with me and requested a quick meeting with Robert and Jessica. He placed a formal, pre-prepared notification on the table, explaining that any attempt by Edward to represent the company, access data, or sign documents would be considered undue interference and was being legally challenged. It wasn't a threat, it was an instruction. From today, only Helen and Robert have signing authority. Any contact from Edward, you document it and forward it to me, Mr. Roberts said. Jessica nodded. I've already activated blocks on all accounts and changed the permission levels on the emails. He can't get in anymore, she said. All business. I saw there a piece of vengeance few people understand. It's not about humiliating them. It's about taking away their power to cause harm. Early that afternoon, Mr. Roberts received a call on his cell phone and put it on speaker. Counselor, the decision on the TRO is out, a voice on the other end said. My body went still. I held my breath. Mr. Roberts asked 2 objective questions and hung up. Then he looked at me. It came through, and it came through exactly as we needed. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed, like someone fitting the last screw into a structure. What does it say? I asked. He summarized it without flourish. The order determines that Edward cannot prevent your access to the home, nor can he make decisions about joint assets without formal communication through the court. It prohibits transactions on specific accounts and assets without authorization, and it establishes that any attempt to access accounts or sign in your name will be treated as a violation of the order. And now? I asked. Now he will be officially served. Today, Mr. Roberts replied. The word officially is what separates conversation from consequence. Late that afternoon, when I returned home, the gate was closed. Edward was inside. I entered without rushing, with the same care you take when stepping on a wet floor, firm but alert. He appeared in the living room with the look of a man who rehearses his lines in his head. "Do you think this is cute? Exposing me? Burying me in paperwork?" he spat. I took the folded copy of the court order from my pocket and placed it on the table. "This isn't exposure, it's a boundary." He picked it up, read the first line, and his face changed again. The same pallor as before, the same fear of paper. "This is absurd. You're treating me like a criminal," he said, trying to shift the blame. I kept my voice low. "You locked me out. You took my documents. You tried to access the bank and the company. And someone prepared a dissolution agreement with my signature on it. I am treating you like a risk, because that's what you've become." He took a nervous step. "You're exaggerating. It was a moment. I was angry." "Anger doesn't print documents," I replied. The doorbell rang. I went to the door and opened it. It was a process server, a different one this time, with the posture of someone who arrives already knowing someone is going to try to shout. He introduced himself, asked for Edward's details, and handed him the notification with the court order attached. Edward took the paper with both hands, as if holding something heavy. "I'm not signing anything," he said impulsively. "You don't need to sign to be considered served, sir." "I am certifying the delivery," the process server replied, polite and firm. Edward opened his mouth, that old reflex of using volume as a weapon, but the shout didn't come out like before. It was a short, broken sound, as if his throat understood it was useless here. He looked at me with a hatred that looked like fear. And for the first time since my suitcase hit the lawn, I saw something different. He was no longer an angry man. He was a man realizing he had run out of ground. I closed the door slowly after the official left and said the simplest and most definitive sentence in the world. "From now on, you no longer decide alone." That night, after I said, "You no longer decide alone," Edward didn't sleep. I knew because he paced the house like someone looking for a hidden exit. He opened and closed drawers, fidgeted with his phone, walked out to the porch and back, drank water. He made too much noise for someone who claimed to be calm. I stayed in my room with the door locked, not out of fear of physical aggression, though I never underestimate the desperation of a cornered man, but out of prudence. Anyone over 40 knows the worst altercations are the ones that happen without witnesses, and I wouldn't give him even that. At 6 a.m., I was already up. Routine was my foundation. I made coffee, checked my bank notifications, no new attempts, and looked around the house as if seeing a place that was no longer sacred, but was still mine by right. Edward appeared in the kitchen with bloodshot eyes and a tone that tried to sound reasonable. "We can solve this without the courts, Helen. You always like to control everything. Well, there you go. You've won." He spoke as if I were fighting for pleasure, as if the locks had changed themselves, as if the papers had vanished by magic. "You want to solve this without the courts now because the courts have caught up to you?" I replied, and went back to my coffee. He sat down and put his hands on his head. "I just wanted to start over." I looked at him without pity and without hatred, only with truth. Starting over isn't evicting someone from their home. Starting over isn't stealing documents. Starting over isn't trying to sign for someone else. He was silent for a few seconds, and then, as if rehearsed, he delivered the line I knew was coming. "Fine, then give me my share. The house, the car, the company. I have a right to it." I let him finish. Then I spoke slowly, so there would be no confusion. "You will get what is fair. Nothing less, nothing more. And it will be done the right way." That was the first time I saw his face truly harden, because fair, to him, had always meant whatever I can get away with. Later that morning, Mr. Roberts called me about a mediation session scheduled for the following week. The word mediation is nice on paper, but anyone who has been through a separation knows some people go to mediate, and some people go to see how far they can intimidate. I went the way I am, with documents, posture, and zero desire to argue about the past. On the day of, I arrived early. The courthouse hallway was crowded. Lawyers with wrinkled suits, a woman holding back tears, an old man with an empty gaze. Real America. This wasn't a soap opera. It was consequence. Edward arrived with a lawyer I had never seen, one of those who smiles from the corner of his mouth and calls you ma'am, as if it were both a compliment and a threat. And at his side was Chloe. She looked more ordinary than I had imagined, without the security of a window pane. Her heels seemed higher than necessary, as if she needed the height to feel like she belonged. When she saw me, she looked away. I didn't see her as a rival. I saw her as an unintentional witness, because she wasn't the center of my story. She was just a detail that made everything clearer. In the room, the mediator asked for calm and objectivity. I sat down, opened my folder, and laid out the pages in a neat line. Edward's lawyer began by trying to paint me as controlling. My client states that Mrs. Miller has always maintained a rigid posture, that she managed everything and prevented any autonomy from her husband. I looked up. I managed things because someone had to. If that's being rigid, then I was. Now, changing locks and stealing documents, what do you call that? The mediator asked that the conversation return to the points at hand: assets, residence, the company. Mr. Roberts spoke for me with surgical precision. He presented the restraining order, the process server's reports, the attempted bank access, the password reset attempts on the finance email, and finally, he placed the photo of the fraudulent dissolution agreement on the table. When Edward's lawyer saw it, he stopped smiling. "This doesn't prove forgery," he said quickly. Mr. Roberts didn't change his tone. "It doesn't prove forgery because it wasn't completed. It wasn't completed because Helen acted first. What it proves is intent and risk, which is why the TRO was granted." Edward tried to talk over him. "I was never going to forge anything. That's absurd." The mediator looked at him, weary, like someone who has heard that line 1,000 times. "Sir, did you change the locks?" Edward hesitated for half a second. "I did, but did you prevent your wife from entering the residence?" "Just a yes or no, please," the mediator cut in. Edward swallowed hard. "Yes." The room fell into a silence I felt in my shoulders. It was as if someone had finally forced him to stop posturing and start answering. Chloe fidgeted with her purse. Her heel tapped the floor once. Nerves. The mediator made a note, then asked about the company. Robert wasn't there, but I had brought the documents: articles of incorporation, equity distribution, company bank statements, authorized signatures. Everything that proves a business isn't a husband's opinion. It's a structure with rules. Edward's lawyer tried an elegant exit. "My client simply wants financial compensation for his participation in the marriage and for supporting his wife." I almost smiled. Almost. "Support is not a withdrawal," I said, "and support doesn't give you the right to hack an account or try to sign my name." The discussion moved on to a proposal. Edward wanted half of everything, in the simplest and most unjust way. I offered what was realistic: a formal separation of marital assets with a forensic accountant to review anything involving the company, the maintenance of my right to remain in the house until a final decision, and a fair division of assets that were effectively shared with full transparency. The mediator tried to find common ground, but the truth is, mediation only works when both parties want closure. Edward wanted to win. And then, in the middle of that standoff, the part I hadn't planned for happened, and it was justice all the same. Chloe suddenly stood up. "I didn't know about this," she said, looking at Edward, not at me. "You said that she was being dramatic, that you just wanted to leave." Edward turned his face to her, furious. "Stay out of this." She took a breath and, for the first time, looked at me with a kind of shame I recognized. "I saw the suitcase on the lawn, but I didn't think—" Her voice broke. "I didn't know about documents, the company, all this stuff. I didn't know that you—" She stopped, because she understood that it didn't matter who I was. What mattered was what he had done. The mediator intervened firmly. "Personal matters are not the subject here. Please sit down." Chloe sat, but she was no longer on his side in the same way. The window was gone. The hearing ended without a full agreement. That was expected. Mr. Roberts told me in the hallway, he lost control today, and when a man loses control, he makes mistakes. In the parking lot, Edward came after me, without his lawyer, without his mask. "Are you happy now?" he asked, full of hate. I stopped 2 steps from my car and answered without raising my voice. I'm not happy. I'm safe. And to me, that's worth more. He tried to get closer. You're going to end up alone. I opened my car door and looked at him calmly. I've been alone inside this marriage. The difference is that now I know where I stand. As I got into the car, I saw Chloe leaving a few yards behind. She didn't leave with him. She got into a rideshare by herself. Edward stood there, the sun beating down on his face, holding a folder of papers that no longer obeyed his voice. And I understood that the most effective revenge isn't the one that screams. It's the one that forces the other person to see their own unfiltered reflection. That night at home, I opened the nightstand drawer and placed the new copies of my documents inside. The bank protocols, the copy of the court order, and a simple note I wrote to myself. You don't go back to a place that kicked you out. I turned off the light, and for the first time, the silence didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a beginning. I received the final decision on a Tuesday morning, under a Charlotte sky so washed-out blue it seemed too beautiful for difficult days. Mr. Roberts called early, the way he always did when it was serious, no suspense, no dramatic phrases. Helen, it's out. The judgment was published. I was in the kitchen, the coffee still hot. I rested my hand on the counter and felt the entire house go quiet inside, as if everything I had lived through in the past few months had come to a single point, ready to be closed. And? I asked. The division is fair, and his actions were noted, just as we documented. I closed my eyes for 2 seconds. It wasn't romantic relief. It was the kind of exhaustion that finally finds solid ground. The decision said what I already knew but needed to see in writing. I had the right to remain in the house until the final settlement, and that settlement took into account the payments I had proven, the renovations I had paid for, and the real effort of each party. The company was protected. No 50-over-50 split based on shouting, no invented compensation. Edward would receive a fixed amount, calculated on what was shared and provable, and nothing more. The rest was mine, not out of pride, but out of logic. The judge was also clear about his misconduct. It wasn't a criminal conviction, but it was a formal rebuke. Changing the locks, stealing documents, attempting to access accounts and emails, circulating a draft agreement with my signature, all of it weighed against his narrative of being a confused man. To me, that was justice. The following week, we went to the lawyer's office to formalize the agreement and register the changes. I arrived with my folder and my documents. Edward arrived with his lawyer and a look that was no longer arrogant. It was the look of someone who has discovered that volume doesn't change what's on paper. He didn't speak to me, and I didn't seek conversation. At the table, I signed what needed to be signed in person, with ID, as I had mandated. I watched my name become security. I watched my identity become my own again. The paralegal stamped, checked, and handed out the copies. And when I put everything back in my folder, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, effortless dignity. When I left the office, the sun was bright. Edward called my name. Helen. I stopped but didn't turn my whole body, just my face. He seemed smaller, not physically, but in the way he occupied space. I went too far, he said. You did, I replied. I didn't think it would turn into all this. Yes, you did. You just thought I wouldn't fight back. He opened his mouth, closed it, and tried another line. Chloe left. I didn't ask when. That was no longer part of my path. I hope you learned something from this, I said quietly. Not for me, for you. Edward looked at the ground. For a second, I saw the man I had met at the beginning, before he confused marriage with dominion, and I felt something rare. Pity. Not the kind of pity that brings you closer, but the kind that ends things. I lost everything, he whispered. You lost control, I corrected him. The rest you traded by choice. I got in my car and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw him standing on the sidewalk, not shouting, with no audience, no window to hide behind, just him and his own consequences. That afternoon, I went back to the office and called my team for a short meeting. What happened in my personal life will not affect anyone's job, I said. "The company is secure, and I appreciate your loyalty and discretion." Robert looked at me with an understanding that, for a woman, protecting her work is also protecting her own freedom. I updated our partnership agreement, reviewed authorities, and created a new internal protocol to prevent any unauthorized representation. It wasn't mistrust of the world, it was maturity. That night, I came home and walked down the hallway without rushing. I opened the bedroom door, and for the first time, the window didn't remind me of Chloe. It reminded me of clean air coming in. I took the new key out of my pocket, the key that was now mine, without a doubt, and hung it on the same old hook. A small scene, a huge meaning. I didn't become happy overnight. I became whole again. And after a public eviction, that is worth more than any speech. A few weeks later, Mrs. Peterson called me over at the gate. "Honey, you see how people still talk about that day?" she asked. "I do," I said. She squeezed my hand. "You were strong, and you were elegant. You didn't cause a scene. You just defended yourself." I thanked her and went inside. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to disappear when someone brought it up, because I hadn't been the woman on the lawn. I had been the woman who set the boundary. The last text message I ever received from Edward said only one word: "Sorry." I didn't reply. For my own sanity. Some doors you close without making a sound, and that's how I understood the kind of revenge that leaves peace in its wake. It's not about destroying the other person, it's about stopping them from continuing to destroy you. It's about taking back what is yours without losing who you are.